Hello, welcome to GRID Live Pre-Race, final race of the Formula One 2020 season, and it'll be the deciding round for the GRID World Motorsport League. Kobe Lambert with the Podium Finish is here with me. I'm Joe Sanriego. We're here to talk about the exciting season finale for Formula One and the 2020 season. Of course, we all know 2020 has been a crazy year for everyone, especially in motorsports. Of course, Formula One, first race of the year, was postponed from March all the way to June. Very late start. But the big thing, we're at the final race of the year. Season just about done. And Lewis Hamilton is back at the track. George Russell, of course, he's back into his Williams ride for this weekend's race after a sensational run last weekend in that Mercedes-Benz. Definitely we're excited to see that Lewis Hamilton is back at the track. Of course, he's going to be going for another win. That'll be his 12th win of the season if he gets it at Abu Dhabi. And then we have Pietro Fittipaldi, again substituting for Romain Grosjean. Grosjean, essentially, he has run his last race. Sadly, of course, it ended with that scary crash. But because we're also grateful that he is okay. He showed off his helmet on Twitter that his kids had designed. Definitely keeping that helmet around, and we're definitely happy to see Romain alive and well. Kobe, we've had some very unpredictable races this year in Formula 1 2020. What do you anticipate for tomorrow's race, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix?
Yeah, Joe, we've definitely had some very unpredictable races here, notably Pierre Gasly winning the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, and then last weekend Sergio Perez winning for Racing Point at the Bahrain Almost Oval Outer Circuit. Yeah, so definitely we've seen some things in 2020 in Formula more, I think we're going to see more of a tame race where you're going to see the usual suspects up front. You're going to see Lewis Hamilton, bald hair, Bottas, and Mercedes, and Max Verstappen in the mix. See if Alex Albon can try to get one last run in to try to show Red Bull that he's worthy of the seat. And very impressive qualifying session for Lando Norris. I think it's going to be a solid season finale, but I don't think we're going to see anything like we saw last weekend at Bahrain.
Yeah, I don't anticipate a crazy race like we saw at Bahrain last weekend with that outer circuit. One of the big things, this race, passing is very tricky. Not until we can really get into turn 7 that we do see the vehicles that could really open up, use DRS. Last weekend's race was one of the most unpredictable. Of course, you brought up Monza. That was a very unpredictable race as well, which we saw Pierre Gasly take a very surprising win, especially after Mercedes had the bad luck with Lewis Hamilton getting that penalty. And of course, last weekend, Sergio Perez taking advantage of the situation where Mercedes had a horrendous pit stop effort. Now, Sergio Perez, of course, he was last at the end of lap 1 last week, coming back to take the win. Charles Leclerc and Max, they were out at the end of lap 1. George Russell just dominated that race last weekend. Mercedes essentially threw it away. Big winners, Racing Point, of course, Sergio Perez got the win. Lance Stroll, 3rd place, and they took 3rd in the Constructor Championship. Do you see Racing Point taking 3rd in the Constructor Championship this year?
Well, I certainly think that Racing Point has a solid chance of getting 3rd in the constructors, but as we know, it's going to come down to their checker flag, and especially with them riding the high from last week of winning with Sergio Perez, and Lance Stroll's going to be starting in the top 10. Sergio Perez 15th right there, as you can see on our starting lineup. Yeah, so definitely it's going to be an uphill battle coming towards the front, as we saw last week. You mentioned Sergio Perez was last on the opening lap after he got turned involved in that first lap incident, in which we saw Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen retire from the race. But we know Sergio Perez and that Racing Point, they can march towards the front, and if him and Lance Stroll can get up there, make sure they beat Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz, I really think that they can secure 3rd in the Constructors Championship, and that will be a huge win for Racing Point as they head into the offseason, and we know they're gonna rebrand into the Aston Martin Racing F1 team in 2021.
Yeah, they're gonna have their work cut out. Of course, we saw today in qualifying, Lando Norris surprised everyone, taking 4th place. He's gonna bring the fight to Racing Point. The big thing, Racing Point, they play defense. They know what they have to do to get the championship. McLaren, they have to catch up and surpass Racing Point. Yes, Lando's in the top 10, so is Sergio. I mean, not Sergio, Carlos Sainz. But definitely Sergio Perez, he showed he could work his way towards the front. I see him scoring points at the end of this race. Lance Stroll, if he could have a good race and finish in the points, that will ensure Racing Point third place in the Constructors' Championship. Now, of course, the race is definitely going to come down to the start, and the start of the race is going to be very important. Let's take a look at your top 10 stars. Max Verstappen was a surprise pole, first pole of the season, third in his career in Formula One. Valtteri Bottas, second, and Lewis Hamilton returning back, third. Then there's Lando Norris, as we mentioned, starting fourth. Alex Albon, great qualifying effort. The top five, all really close in time. Carlos Sainz, Daniel Kvyat, Lance Stroll, that Racing Point there, where we were talking about the Racing Points because Sergio Perez is 15th. Charles Leclerc, again, bringing that Ferrari towards the front. And Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri rounding out your top 10. Of course, when we see the top 10, we know the start. As soon as they start, they have that first corner and then a bit of a bend where they could start putting down some pressure on the gas. How critical will the start be, especially for the top three starters?
It was going to be very critical, as we see a lot in these Formula One races. Dependent on the start. If you're able to have the lead clear in turn one, a lot of the times it's usually game over there unless something really crazy happens in the pit stops. But lately in Formula One, that actually hasn't been the case. As we see last weekend, Sergio Perez was last in the opening lap, as I mentioned, and he drove all the way through the field. And and he obviously had some help with the Mercedes blunder and pit road, but Perez was able to hold on and get the very first victory of his Formula One career. So not necessarily all the time where the top three at the end of lap one be like that's going to be your podium. Yeah, that's definitely not always the case, but I think the start's going to be critical, and I think we're going to see Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, and Valtteri Bottas 1, 2, 3 at the end of lap one.
Yeah, the start, especially with that first corner leading to that bend, it's going to be very critical. One of the big things, of course, we know in Bahrain, there was a lot of talk about the dirty side of the track, which in the first race there, the Bahrain Grand Prix, Valtteri Bottas had a horrible start, fell from essentially second below to third place and kept falling down. The week after, though, we saw how George Russell in that dirty lane made the best of it, got the lead. So definitely when it comes to the start, it's going to be something between essentially the two Mercedes, two Red Bulls, and the wild card. It's definitely Lando Norris in fourth place. If he could get a really good start and if Bottas ahead of him gets a good start, I wouldn't be surprised if you see Lando in the top three. And of course, with this track especially, let's take a look at the track map. As you can see, after turn 1, 2, 3, 4, really, it's a lot of cornering, and it's not until after turn 7 is where you could really start to lay down the power. So that advantage of the big horsepower is essentially neutralized until after turn 7. The track is 5.55 kilometers, 3.45 miles, 21 corners. Now, Lewis Hamilton does lead all active drivers with the most wins at this track with 5 wins. Lewis needs to finish on the podium to secure the GRID World Motorsport League Championship. Do you see Lewis Hamilton finishing on the podium for the race?
Yes, I definitely see Lewis finish on the podium. And it's, obviously missed last weekend because he tested positive for the virus. It's not going to surprise me to see Lewis Hamilton finish on the podium. I actually don't think he's going to win this weekend, but we'll get to that later in our pick a winner at the towards the end of our program. But Lewis did mention that he's still experiencing, some of the side effects of COVID-19 in terms of fatigue and how some people it takes them a while to recover and they just feel like really tired. Yeah, and Lewis also admitted that he's not 100% fit to compete. And like and like being able to endure throughout the race. I do think that we'll see Lewis Hamilton be able to finish the race without any major issues. But it's definitely something to keep an eye on this weekend as Lewis continues his recovery.
Lewis is, of course, continuing his recovery, not fully 100%. It always seems when it comes to the race, he always seems to somehow find that extra bit of energy, extra bit of effort to get the job done. I see him still finishing in the podium. I think it'll be a big shock if he doesn't finish in the podium. Now, of course, Valtteri Bottas started second in the race. He has won here before. 2017 was his last win. Many are critical of his spot with the Mercedes team, especially after George Russell's performance last race weekend, controlling the race from start up to that second safety car, essentially. Does Bottas' performance today affect any 2021 plans that Mercedes might have? Or is Mercedes committed to having Bottas with the team for the entire 2021 season?
Oh no, I don't think the performance in Abu Dhabi is going to affect Valtteri Bottas in 2021 at all. I think Mercedes is committed to him at least through the 2021 season. I don't really see them, just if Valtteri has a terrible day, I don't see them just completely, you'd be like, hey Valtteri, you haven't performed up to par. So we're gonna throw you out and put George Russell in the Mercedes full time. I don't think that's gonna happen in 2021. But I do think that Valtteri is going to be in a much shorter leash in 2000, you know, about the 2022 season because George Russell was very impressive last weekend at the Secure Grand Prix. He showed what everyone believed he could do. That George Russell could be competitive in a in a fast car and and go out there and show that he's capable of winning races in Formula One. And I do think that George Russell made Toto Wolff's job, when looking at the 2022 season a lot harder. And it would be interesting to see what the Mercedes 2022 lineup would look like because if it's like George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, that's going to be a real tough lineup because we know Lewis is a number one driver and clearly at Williams George Russell's a number one driver as well. So basically it'll be like Mercedes will be getting two number one drivers, and we saw how that worked out at Ferrari with Sebastian Vettel and Charles Leclerc. Yeah, so it would. Yeah, so I think it would definitely upset the team dynamic if we had George Russell and Lewis Hamilton there, but it would definitely be a strong, potent lineup. And Valtteri Bottas he's been a solid number two driver at Mercedes, and on occasion he's been able to get the best of Hamilton just like he did in qualifying today.
Yeah, he got the best in qualifying. Overall, I feel Bottas, his performance, he's been a good number two driver. Of course, Bottas doesn't want to be a number two driver. He wants to be the number one driver. He wants to get that championship. Next year really is going to be a make or break year for Bottas. If he go out there, prove he could still win races, if he could bring the fight to Lewis Hamilton and show that, hey, I could win a championship post Lewis Hamilton, maybe he could get a 2022 right. But especially the last few races, if he has another performance like that, I think there'll be a lot of questions entering 2021, and he doesn't want that. He wants to go out there. If he could win this race, especially take it away from Max Verstappen, he could have a lot of momentum entering Australia. And he always seems to have these ways where he's really, really on it, and then just these ways where it's like, and then just nothing seems to be going right. Bad luck, no luck, poor performances. So definitely going to be interesting to see where he turns out after this race. Alex Albon, another driver a lot of people are talking about when it comes to 2021. He is starting fifth, but an impressive effort considering how close the top five were on times. We know that car is more suited for Max Verstappen. Big thing, Perez, the person that's been talked about, taking him over his top spot, starting way in the back due to the penalty. Nothing announced still from Red Bull in 2021. If Alex Albon was to get a podium, will that be enough to make the case that he earns the seat in 2021?
Honestly, I don't think a podium would be enough for Alex Albon at this point. However, I'm starting to think that's going to be like a 50-50 call from Red Bull. They're going to keep Albon or they're not. Sergio Perez going to victory lane last week. It's going to make it really. Yeah, yeah, when you get a victory like that, it's really tough not to put Sergio Perez in that Red Bull, and I think he definitely put himself in the conversation to get the seat alongside Max Verstappen and yeah, Alex Albon has looked really strong so far this weekend, but I'm afraid that it might be too little, too late for him. But there's definitely still a chance that he could return to Red Bull, and maybe they'll give him a second chance. But because I think Alex Albon still has a lot of upside, and he has potential to do great in Formula One. It just hasn't worked out yet, and and I saw somewhere, I believe it was yesterday, where they were saying that Alex Albon, that he didn't really get a chance to find his footing in Formula One at AlphaTauri, and get the time that he needs to develop his skills in a lower pressure environment, because we saw Pierre Gasly struggle significantly with Red Bull, and then Red Bull decided to can him and promote Albon, right out of the blue, and Albon was put in a tough situation on a high pressure environment to perform, when he's literally, just out there, a young driver trying to learn the ropes of Formula One. So I do think that Albon might have been rushed up to Red Bull a little too fast and should have been given more time to develop as a driver at AlphaTauri, in the environment where there's not as much pressure as there is him in Red Bull. But overall, I think Albon just needs to go out there and just do the best that he possibly can, and then his fate's going to be left up to Dr. Helmut Marko. And for a lot of drivers in the Red Bull program, that's really scary when Dr. Marko has the final call.
Yeah, go out there, run your race. I mean, that's the big thing. It's the last race of the year. Really, there's no pressure when it comes to what's going to happen the following week. The season's going to be over. Championship's been decided. The Constructor Championship's been decided. Just go out there, run your best race. And I really does feel, like you said, a 50-50 chance. Let's see where the cards fall. Sergio Perez really made a big statement last weekend. I think Red Bull is going to have a really hard time deciding what to do, because I could totally see if Red Bull sticks with Alex Albon, there's going to be people critical of Alex Albon throughout 2021. And a lot of people talk about, why don't we have Sergio Perez in Formula One when he's shown the talent? If Red Bull was to select Sergio Perez, I could see again people being critical about, they went with Sergio Perez, they didn't give Alex Albon a fair shot, and there's a lot of problems with Red Bull, especially with Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon. Now we have Sergio Perez. Red Bull is going to be in a really tough spot. It's going to be really interesting to see how they handle everything. Now, of course, the race is going to be tomorrow morning, very early, 8 a.m. Eastern, 5 a.m. Pacific, but definitely Grid Live post-race, noon. Tomorrow, we're going to have Jessica from Paddock Inside joining us, as well as Matt from the GRID World Motorsport League. By then, we'll know who is the GRID World Motorsport League champion. Now it's time for pick a winner. When it comes to the Formula One race, who do you have, Kobe?
I think it's going to be a battle between Max Verstappen and I think Valtteri Bottas is going to be up there as well. I think Hamilton's going to be on the podium, but his first race back, I don't see him winning this race. And if I had to pick one, I think I'm going to go with Valtteri Bottas to get the victory. And then we're going to have one of those messages on the radio from Valtteri saying, "To whom it may concern," and he's going to show everyone that, once again, that I'm deserving of this seat at Mercedes.
I have to agree with you. I think Bottas is going to take the win. I just don't see Max Verstappen taking this win. I think when it comes to the start, I anticipate Max is going to have the lead. Bottas will be second. But at some point in the race, I think either after turn 7 with that Mercedes horsepower or during pit stops, I think Bottas is going to get around Max. And then this race, quite often, they love to try to do a one-stop strategy, especially since pit road is very long and very slow. I see Mercedes, they're going to do everything they can to get the win. Lewis Hamilton, I do see he'll be on the podium. If he could get the win, I think that'd be a big surprise. We know he's not 100%, still recovering from his illness, but definitely it's going to be interesting to see how it turns out. Of course, the big thing as well, too, it is this championship deciding race for the GRID World Motorsport League, which is going to wrap up after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. It's between Lewis Hamilton and Phil Hansen, the endurance racer in European Le Mans Series and World Endurance Championship. This lowest finish was 4th place throughout the season. Of course, the big battle between him and Lewis Hamilton. Matt from GRID World Motorsport League will be joining us on the air. And definitely encourage people to share their questions with Matt about the GRID World Motorsport League tomorrow as we crown the champion.
Yeah, definitely. Really excited to have Matt come on our program tomorrow, talk about the GRID World Motorsport League. We're gonna be. Yeah, it's crazy, Joe. Coming to the end of the 2020 season, it's been a really long racing season, and this is really gonna signal the end of that. as we're gonna get a little short break, and then we're gonna be back on the air after the new year to start up our 2021 season here at Grid Network, starting with the Formula E season opener. And speaking of Formula E, got some news of two Formula E drivers who are going to be receiving a big opportunity to test a Formula One car, and those are Mercedes Formula E drivers Stoffel Vandoorne and Nick De Vries. They're going to get to test the Mercedes Formula One car in the upcoming young driver test at Abu Dhabi following the race weekend. And this is a huge opportunity for those two drivers who many believe would develop into Formula One stars at some point. And we saw Stoffel Vandoorne drive for McLaren at a time when they were trying to get more competitive, and he didn't really get a proper shot to showcase the talents that we saw when he was in GP2. Now he'll get to test the fastest car on the Formula One grid. And last weekend, some initially thought that Stoffel Vandoorne would replace Lewis Hamilton at the secure Grand Prix. Instead, the team chose George Russell, and Stoffel felt absolutely gutted that Mercedes didn't choose him to drive the race. Do you think we'll ever see Stoffel Vandoorne back in Formula One and a proper seat to show us why everyone was so hyped up about his talent from the GP2 days?
That's a really tough call. Stoffel Vandoorne has a lot of talent. Formula E now is a World Championship. He's going to go out there and I think really try to make the case that if I can win the Formula E World Championship, I am worthy of a Formula One ride, especially with Mercedes. Of course, that wasn't the big things, of course, as well. Vandoorne was on the sidelines, seeing what George Russell could do. That's going to make it even harder if they're talking about, okay, moving beyond both tasks. We know George Russell's really good in the car. But there's going to be people out there, Vandoorne, Stoffel Vandoorne, come on, give him an opportunity. McLaren, they were not 100% car. That team was not in contention for a win. And it really, I mean, you have Fernando Alonso there, Vandoorne there, just could not get the job done. I would love to see Vandoorne be in Formula One. Considering how everything is with Formula One, especially we only have 20 rides. Out of those 20 rides, 6 realistically have a chance to win. It's very slim for Vandoorne.
Yeah, I don't think Stoffel Vandoorne's chances of being on the F1 grid anytime soon. I really don't think they're that great at all. But going back to the GP2 days, it looked like Stoffel Vandoorne was going to be a future Formula One star because he was so dominant in his championship season in GP2, which is now Formula 2 championship. And I remember people were hyping up Stoffel Vandoorne. There was like, this guy's going to be a future Formula One star because look what he's doing in GP2. He's absolutely dominating these races. But unfortunately, we just never saw that with Stoffel Vandoorne, and he was at McLaren. I mentioned at a time when they were really struggling, when they were trying to move further in the midfield, and it was just a real struggle for everyone at Mercedes. And having Fernando Alonso as a teammate, that didn't help at all because it's hard when you're going up against Alonso as a teammate. And for Stoffel Vandoorne, I don't think that the door back to Formula One is completely closed. It's slim, but the door is not shut permanently. And you did bring up a good point, about if he's able to go out there win the Formula E championship, he could definitely put his name back out there. And we saw when Antonio Felix da Costa, the most recent Formula E champion, won the title. He had some Formula One teams looking at him, and we know da Costa, he didn't get a chance to race in Formula One, but that Formula E championship put him back on the radar. And I think if Stoffel Vandoorne is able to win the Formula E championship with the Mercedes Formula E team, then maybe he'll do the same as well. And looking at the other driver at the Mercedes Formula E team, we have Nick De Vries, who won the 2019 Formula 2 championship, and he did not find a drive in Formula One at all. When he was a part of McLaren's driver development program, it seemed like he might have a path to Formula One. Unfortunately, that came to an end during his championship season when he left the McLaren driver development program. Even claiming the title wasn't good enough for him to secure a drive. Instead, he found a home in endurance racing in LMP2, and he's a reserve driver for Toyota Gazoo Racing in the FIA World Endurance Championship, and also a full-time driver for Mercedes in Formula E. And definitely, after missing out on Formula One, this test has to be a good feeling for Nick De Vries. Given his commitment to his racing programs and sports cars in Formula E, has the doors shut permanently for a potential Formula One career even at age 25. Nick De Vries is still a young driver.
Still a very young driver, and it is crazy to think about that. we may never see him in a Formula One car. One of the things that's really interesting, I know it has gotten a lot of attention, is the fact that we are so dependent on Formula One for drivers with funding. Drivers like De Vries, a lot of talent. I am so happy he landed with Mercedes Formula E team. Towards the end of the season, that Formula E team really started to show its muscle. De Vries really showed what he's capable of doing. I do see where drivers like De Vries, other drivers that they instead go to Formula E instead of Formula One because they know they could get a competitive ride in Formula E Endurance Championship. It's essentially a loss for Formula One. De Vries is earning fans in Formula E in Endurance Championship racing. Those fans will follow him to F1 if he gets the opportunity. The big thing is, do you want to go to Formula One and be with a backmarker team? Most likely, no. Yeah, there's always the potential. I could go to team, change things around, and my town brings them points, get the most out of that car, and then step up to a better team. But the way it's looking, with those backmarker teams so dependent on drivers with personal funding, sponsorship deals that they're bringing to the teams, for drivers like De Vries, it's really hard and it's almost a better solution. Go to Formula E. Show them what you could do there. Not only that, it's good for Formula E too. Instead of saying, oh, we have a star that was in Formula One, came here, we're now saying we have this upcoming star who picked Formula E instead of Formula One. Formula E is going to run with it. I can see De Vries being a big star in Formula E. If he has a strong season this year, maybe even take a championship, then I could see maybe some people talk about he deserves a spot in Formula One.
Yeah, definitely. And even at age 25, I don't think the door is necessarily closed for Nick De Vries. We saw what he was able to do in Formula 2. That definitely looked like he could be one of the Formula 1 stars of tomorrow, but unfortunately, that didn't work out, and he ended up in Formula E, and I think that's the next best situation. And you did bring up a good point about drivers wanting to compete in cars that are going to be competitive. And I'm sure Nick De Vries would rather be a front runner for Mercedes and Formula E and compete for wins and championships instead of driving for a backmarker Formula One team where he has no chance at winning unless it's a crazy day like we saw in Monza and Bahrain last weekend, in which Pierre Gasly, AlphaTauri, and Sergio Perez Racing Point won the race. Yeah, so unless we have a weekend like that, then probably not going to have a great chance to win. So I do think that Formula E and then his drives in sports car racing is going to be the best thing for him right now. But as we saw with a driver named Brendan Hartley, even if you're in sports car racing or whatever, the door is not completely shut with Formula One. And we saw Brendan Hartley. He started off his young career in the Red Bull driver development program, and then he got dropped by Red Bull. He went to race over here in the United States in what was called the Grand Am Rolex Sports Car Series at the time with Star Works. Hartley impressed a lot of people. Then he was so impressive. He got called up to drive for the old Porsche LMP1 factory team, and ended up doing extremely well in the World Endurance Championship. And then Red Bull saw how much he had developed as a driver in sports car racing, and then Red Bull gave him a drive with AlphaTauri. And yeah, Brendan Hartley's time in Formula One didn't last for long, but Brendan Hartley was able to show you that even as an older driver, even when you've been dropped by Red Bull before, you do well enough in sports car racing or even Formula E, you can definitely put your name back on the map. And Brendan Hartley was able to get an F1 drive, and that's why I don't think that the Formula One dream is dead yet for Nick De Vries.
Yeah, I don't see it being dead either. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how Nick De Vries does and that Mercedes team in Formula E. Of course, that's going to be starting up January 16th with a doubleheader round at Santiago, Chile. Renault, one of the big things, of course, next year there'll be Alpine racing. Fernando Alonso will be them. But this weekend, we got a little preview of the two coming together. But this time with Fernando Alonso, he'll be with Esteban Ocon. And of course, with the rebrand, one of the big things we saw was the old Renault R25 take a spin around the Yas Marina circuit. Definitely a special moment for everyone, especially for everyone that remembers the V10 era in Formula One. Hearing the sound of that vehicle going all out that lap, especially. Alonso was really pushing. It wasn't just parade around the racetrack. Locked up the tires at one point. We saw the car twitch around a little bit here and there. And man, we're just listening, enjoying the sound of hearing that V10 again. We saw the pit crews logged around the wall, taking pictures, videos as the car was making its way towards the front stretch. Was that a real special moment that brought back memories, Kobe?
Oh yeah, definitely. It brought back the days when I was just a little kid, first starting to get into Formula One, and I had these old Formula One video games. I think it might have been Formula One World Championship Edition on PS3, and then the sound of that car, the roar, the scream of the V10. It definitely brought back those special memories of why you fall in love with the sport in the first place, and actually this motivated me to fire up my PS4 and put in my Formula One video game, and I actually took Alonso's 2005 Renault R25 for a spin myself on PlayStation, and just to hear the roar of the car. It definitely brought back special memories of my childhood of why I fell in love with motorsport in the first place.
Definitely a lot of nostalgia feelings seeing that car out on the track. 2005 was a wonderful season for Formula One. The battle between him and Schumacher, especially at Imola, that last lap battle between the two, just great stuff. Hearing that car out there, it was spectacular. I mean, it did bring back a lot of memories. And of course, a lot of times you go on YouTube and you type in Formula One start, and you see people recording the start of the races, particularly with the V10 era. The noise is incredible. It just echoes. And that's just something where Formula One as a brand, we all remember in the intro, they even featured the sound of the car because it was so distinctive, that loud, high-pitched sound of the V10s. Now, NBC Sports Report and NASCAR driver Parker Cleveland brought up an interesting point that the V10 era did caught people's awe and imagination in response to those at the track. Essentially, everyone had their eyes glued on the track when Alonso was out there. Another good point he made was the possibility of taking a 2005 spec NASCAR Cup car and putting it into qualifying trim. Then people at the track would stop in their tracks and watch what was going on. As we know, NASCAR has a 550 horsepower high downforce package on the larger tracks. Days of reaching 195, 200 miles per hour in qualifying appear to be over. How would you feel about watching a Cup car from 2005 make laps around, such as Atlanta and Charlotte Motor Speedway today?
Oh yeah, that was definitely a great point that NBC Sports reporter and NASCAR driver Parker Kligerman brought up about watching a 2005 spec NASCAR Cup Series car go around the track on 1.5 miles. I think that would be absolutely amazing, and considering where things are right now in the sport, I think a lot of people at the track, and if it's broadcast on TV, people will drop whatever they're doing and watch that because as we know that the 90s into all the way to the mid 2000s, those were the absolute glory days of NASCAR, and that was the era that really made a lot of people fall in love with the sport, and also I really do think that this would be true because I know in the NASCAR Xfinity Series we've seen at the super speedway tracks the Ford teams that they run like a different exhaust, and it sounds like the super speedway cars of old. And I know you know what I'm talking about, Joe. I remember from the early to mid 2000s the roar of the Cup cars on the super speedways at Daytona and Talladega, and and when we heard those cars going around the track, a lot of people got so excited because they're like, wow, that makes me think of my childhood. That makes me think of the days that I fell in love with NASCAR. I think that would be a really good thing to see in NASCAR in the future. If let's say, hey, we don't have anything going on the track right now, so we're gonna put so and so in this Cup car from 2005, and we're gonna make laps. We're gonna show it on TV, and just show it off at the track, and everybody's gonna be reminiscing to the good old days of NASCAR.
Yeah, it's a move where it'll get the fans that have been around NASCAR a long time to remember the fun, especially when they're brand new to the sport. The sounds of the cars in the super speedway then was something. I feel overall there's definitely an element where the noise from the vehicles does create some sense of excitement. I remember attending my first NASCAR Cup Series race, just walking up to the racetrack, and we could hear a Cup Series car making laps, the noise echoing all over. That just got you all excited. Formula One, when the V10s were coming to the grid and they were warming up their car, just revving it up, trying to spin the wheels just to get a little heat in there, that got you all amped up. One of the big things, of course, now, Formula One, quieter engine, and there are some big pros to that as well. One of the big things, of course, and most of the time, especially on a NASCAR racetrack, good luck trying to talk to each other, more yelling at each other during the race. And one of the big things I wonder is, are we going to start seeing where, especially with NASCAR, they got a new car coming up. We've been hearing things about the engine. Will they be considering the factor of, okay, the noise? We do know that gets people excited because they could hear that from the speedway. That's something where we want to tone it down a bit, keep it up there, make it louder. It's really going to be interesting to see what happens with the new cars. And definitely was just really exciting to see that old Renault do a lap at Yas Marina circuit.
Yeah, definitely. And it seems like in the future when NASCAR, goes to the new engine later on in the decade, I think they're gonna look at a slightly quieter engine. I don't think it's gonna be like so quiet, so quiet. Well, like in Formula E terms of quiet, but I don't think it's gonna be as loud as you've seen. And I know being at a NASCAR race at the track, when those cars are extremely loud, and even after the race is over, my ears are still ringing. I can still hear the roar of those NASCAR engines in my head, and it takes a few hours for it to disappear. And actually, I do like the loud sound of the car, but I wouldn't oppose for them taking it down a few notches. And I think that'll be really beneficial for the fans as well, because they'll actually be able to hear the thoughts going on in their head. And let's move on to our last story for today. Gonna talk about Mick Schumacher. And yesterday, 2020 FT champion Mick Schumacher made his debut in an official Formula One practice session with Haas. He ended up replacing Kevin Magnussen in free practice one. And next year, we know it's been announced he'll drive full time for Haas next year alongside the troubled Nikita Mazepin. And in free practice one, Schumacher ended up 18th fastest, outpacing his teammate Pietro Fittipaldi, who was 19th. And wow, Joe, wow. A Schumacher and a Fittipaldi on track together at the same time. That's definitely a blast from the past. And with the Schumacher name returning to the Formula One grid for the first time since 2012, all eyes will be on Mick in his rookie season. So, in looking ahead to 2021, what are some reasonable expectations for Mick?
Considering the team he's in with Haas, the big thing is finishing the races. I think realistically, with the Ferrari engine, which they use, the state of that, top 15 finishes will be good. Finishing the races, of course, that's always a good step. Getting the top 15, even better. Depending on how things go, you might have a crazy race here or there where, hey, you snuck in, you got some points. Brilliant. The big thing you don't want to do, go out there and crash. You don't want to not complete laps, not complete races. I know it's going to be tricky with that Haas vehicle. You're not going to be contending for the win. It could be too easy to over push it, and next thing you know, you're in trouble. I think Mick Schumacher could really demonstrate his skills by elevating the team, getting the most out of that car. And of course, everybody's going to be comparing him with his new teammate. So definitely can't hurt to beat your new teammate. Make the case that, look, I am consistently getting the most out of this vehicle, and I want something better for 2022. Of course, 2022, everyone's going to have a new car. So the playing field could be a lot more even for Mick and Haas by then.
Actually, I think Mick is going into a decent situation in terms of his long-term development as a Formula One driver. As you mentioned, the car that he's at Haas, towards the back of the grid, trying to become more competitive in the midfield. And in the upcoming years, as we see, they've kind of taken a few steps back. Remember this? They started off strong in the midfield, and then they lost a lot over the years, and with the new funding coming in, and they're in a rookie driver lineup. Maybe this is what Haas needs in order to become a more competitive program. And given the history of Mick's junior Formula career, we usually don't see Mick Schumacher really show what he can do until the second season. The rookie season, for the most part, is really average at the most, nothing really spectacular. And I think we're going to see the same in 2021. I don't think we're going to see Mick Schumacher, wowing us and like pulling off a Pierre Gasly or Sergio Perez in 2021. I do think we'll definitely see some good runs for Mick. I don't see him, being a contender, being like, hey, we're gonna finish in the points all the time. But I do think that Haas will take a slight step forward in 2021. But I do think 2022, when they introduce the new regulations, that's definitely going to be a year to watch. Yeah, but Haas in a low pressure environment, I think Mick's going to be given an opportunity to develop and hone his skills, and then as Mick becomes more comfortable in Formula One, then that's when I think that he's going to develop into a star eventually at some point in his Formula One career.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to watch him develop. A lot of people are seeing big things for him. Of course, he knows people are watching it. It's going to be really interesting to see how he handles the pressure. Essentially, all the Michael Schumacher fans, a lot of them are going to be cheering for him as well. All eyes are going to be on him, especially 2022 as well. Tomorrow, Grid Live post-race will be noon Eastern, so a little time after the Formula One race. Get some breakfast and then join us for Grid Live post-race. It will be the final post-race of the 2020 year. Of course, it's the last race of the year for the GRID World Motorsport League as well. Matt from the GRID World Motorsport League will be joining us. We definitely encourage you to join us as well for Sunday's program. Also, we encourage you to join GRID Patreon. Colin has been a great Patreon. His support is ensuring that we're on the air for 2021, and we're expanding our coverage. And we invite you to invest in with us. We are planning for a big 2021 season. Your support will make it even bigger and better. We'll be here on the air for you, thanks to the support of everyone on Patreon. And we also want to invite everyone to check out one of our partners, Publis. For being a GRID Network viewer, you click on the link below on our YouTube or Facebook page, you'll get a 10% discount. Publis does offer dog accessories, clothing, and gear. 10% of every purchase you make from their website goes to dogs that are homeless, sick, and shelters to help rescue dogs, especially a good cause. We are excited to be part of Publis partnership. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment on the video. We want to hear who you think is going to win, your thoughts on Mick Schumacher as well, and Formula E, everything. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day. For Kobe Lambeth at the Podium Finish, I'm Joe Samaniego. Enjoy the race. Joe Samaniego here. Want to invite you to go check out Publis. Publis is a dog clothing and accessory company based in Austria. 10% of each of your purchases goes to helping dogs in need, whether it's homeless, sick, or ill dogs. This is one of the reasons why we support it. Kiska here is a rescue dog from rural Alaska and our GRID office dog. We care about our furry buddies, and we know you do as well. Definitely check out Publis.com. There's a link on the video description, and by clicking on that link, you get a 10% discount on your purchase as well.